So just to lead into the essential ed lesson, cover the basics of cause and effect. And we'll see a short passage here before we go over to essential ed and get into the real meat and potatoes of today's lesson. So as it mentions here, cause and effect is a relationship between two things, and basically one making the other happen. So a cause is something that happens. It could be anything. For example, my refrigerator stopped working, right? Anything. And as a result of whatever that cause is, you have an effect, right? That's what's going to follow. So my refrigerator stopped working, all the food in my refrigerator spoiled, right? That's going to be the effect. So like it has here, if you spend a week lounging around munching on junk food all day, the effect is that you could gain a couple pounds, right? So a good primer and a good way to sort of identify cause and effect, because this is certainly something that will appear on your social studies test, is being able to identify and be able to pick, what was the cause, what was the effect. Ask yourself what happened, right? That's going to be the effect. That's the outcome, the end result. And for a cause, you answer, you ask the question, how or why did it happen? Why did the food spoil in my refrigerator? Because it stopped working, right? Cause and effect. Those are pretty simple. We'll get into sort of a little more detail with that, right? Because like I said, we'll talk about the Great Depression down the road. There's multiple causes to what led to the Great Depression. Today, we'll talk about one of the causes of the Great Recession at the beginning of the 2007, 2008. And again, one cause can spark a whole lot of different effects. So it has a short passage here. Unique to today's global warming are the sources of the heat-trapping gases and rates of change. So millions of years ago, heat-trapping gases were released due to a natural event. Huge eruptions that forced carbon out of rocks were followed by warming oceans that freed methane gas from ocean floor deposits. However, most modern carbon emissions come from burning fossil fuels, coal, gas, oil, right? The stuff that runs most of our cars, heats our home, stuff like that. So for transportation and industries, like it says, and from certain chemical reactions, such as making cement, I did not know that, creates a greenhouse effect. Human-caused carbon emissions are setting the atmospheric stage for current and future warming. So what we can infer, right? A lot of times an effect, we may not know what the effect is, but we can make an inference, right? We can read between the lines when we get information like this and draw a conclusion about what the effect is going to be. So burning fossil fuels, right? That's a cause, like transportation powered by gasoline. What is going to be the effect that we can infer from that? Carbon emissions get trapped in the atmosphere, heating up the planet like a greenhouse, right? So that is our cause and inferred effect. Of course, if we're studying like history, we know what the effects are, right? We're going to look at causes. And that's actually one of the realms of history, right? In studying the past, we find out sometimes history doesn't change, right? The events of the past don't change, but our understanding of them will. So sometimes we look at an event and we think we know what the cause and the effect are, but a little closer examination, or we find new documents, we look at it from different perspectives, we realize maybe the cause was different, or there is additional information there, and maybe the effect has been modified as well. And that's why people keep reading or writing and studying history, because there's still stuff that we don't understand as well as we could about the past. And there's another one here. We talked a little bit about women's suffrage. So the women's suffrage movement was a decades-long fight to win the right to vote for women in the United States. It took activists and reformers nearly 100 years to win that fight. We talked about Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, who never actually got to vote in a federal election, but fought most of their dang lives to get the right to vote. And the campaign was not easy. August 18th, 1920, the 19th Amendment to the Constitution was finally ratified. Enfranchising, right? So disenfranchisement is when you sort of lose the right to vote, or they put up blocks to your right to vote. Enfranchisement means that you are receiving the right to vote. So all American women declaring for the first time that they, like men, deserve all the rights and responsibilities of citizenship. So it went deeper, just as a sidebar, than just the right to vote. This is establishing that the 19th Amendment is used a lot of times in other types of civil rights fights, right? As well as like the 14th and 15th Amendment, which gave freed slave, or legally changed the status of slaves to citizens, not just freed. And then I think it's the 15th Amendment made sure that they had the right to vote. And those have been used in other situations, not just for their, that we refer back to those in court cases, the Supreme Court and such, to establish other precedent for citizenship or rights. And the cause and inferred effect here, right? So for nearly 100 years, activists and reformers campaigned for women to be able to vote. The inferred effect, we know women in the United States obtained the right to vote through the 19th Amendment to the Constitution. That's not necessarily inferred, because we actually do know the outcome there, right? That's from history. The global warming is a little bit different, because we can, we are thinking critically about what's going to happen down the road as far as an effect will go. And it's already, starting to happen. So now we'll look at the essential ed lesson. So it's analyzing cause and effect in social studies. And hopefully, if you guys want to take a look ahead of time, just make sure that it's there. It should be there. Everything's taking some time today.
Hey there, this is Leonard. Welcome to the lesson on analyzing cause and effect. This lesson will teach you how to analyze different kinds of cause and effect relationships, as well as how to tell a causation apart from a correlation.
That's important, and we'll get some explanation here.
Our country's laws were shaped by events in the past. To understand how and why our country works the way it does, it helps to understand the relationship between cause and effect. Once you understand why something happens and what the consequences will be, it's a lot easier to predict whether or not your plan is a good idea. The relationship between cause and effect is pretty easy to understand when there's one cause producing one effect. A boy kicks a ball and the ball goes flying. That's a pretty easy relationship to see. What about when one cause has multiple effects? You'd be surprised how complicated things can become. Take alcohol prohibition, for example. Back in 1919, the United States added the 18th Amendment, outlawing the manufacture, transportation, and sale of alcohol.
You might remember we saw the political cartoon earlier about prohibition, right? The voter chopping down the saloons. That was, symbolic that the voters are wanting to establish prohibition.
Was that prohibiting alcohol would reduce crime and improve the health of citizens. But it didn't work out that way. The demand for alcohol was so great that private citizens took it upon themselves to brew their own alcohol. Since illegal alcohol isn't regulated by the government, no one was making sure that the alcohol was safe to drink. Many police officers, meanwhile, grew wealthy on bribes from alcohol traffickers, worsening the corruption of law enforcement. The amendment had many unintended and far-reaching consequences, so much so that the amendment eventually had to be repealed. If the Congress of 1919 had a stronger grasp of cause and effect, maybe the 18th Amendment would never have been written.
And yeah, so he's absolutely right with the 18th Amendment, trying to, and you see as far as today how well that worked, right? There was just this idea that, alcohol, basically, particularly if you're thinking about 19th century sort of logic, leads to sin. And, that's certainly the idea that as far as like alcohol abuse, and when we know, domestic violence and drunk driving, there's still a lot of issues surrounding alcohol. But right, when you just outlaw something, then it's not going to just go away. So we have issues where, particularly with alcohol, we had a rise in organized crime, bootleggers. As he mentions, there's no regulation because it's supposed to be outlawed, it's supposed to be banned. So the government isn't, able to, view what's being sold, underground. So there's just a whole slew of problems, and we see this, particularly with today and other, what do they call them? Whatever the classification is for drugs. So marijuana is a big one right now, legalizing it and all this stuff. And not that it should be, highly regulated, not that we shouldn't watch, who it's available for. And there's certainly other issues around it. But legalizing it, you can monitor it a lot easier than if it is illegal. People get up in arms about things like, methadone clinics for treating, opioid abuse. But the thing is, whenever they're available, there's a reduction in crime in those communities, and you can also, monitor people with opioid addiction. You see them coming and going, and you can offer help. If you just try to push that under the rug and just say, well, this is illegal, or you're not going to help them, you're just going to wind up just making the problem worse. And just like he says, cause and effect. So like with the boy kicking the ball, right? That's the immediate cause and effect. But the boy kicks the ball into a window, shatters the window, and then somebody cuts their hand cleaning up glass, right? There's a whole other slew of effects that can happen from that.
Every cause and effect relationship must also be a correlation. A correlation is when two different events occur at the same time for related reasons. Ice cream sales are correlated to the sale of sunscreen. When ice cream sales go up, so does the sale of sunscreen. You will also see an inverse correlation between the sale of ice cream and the sale of coats. As ice cream sales go up, coat sales go down. Does ice cream cause a lower demand for coats? What about sunscreen? Does sunscreen make people want to buy ice cream? No. These are all just correlations. They're all related to one another because they all have a common cause. Summertime. Everyone's just trying to stay cool. It's easiest when you can see a common cause, but it's not the only way to spot a correlation. You can also look for correlating behavior. That's when two events consistently happen at the same time. You may not know why they're happening at the same time, but the consistency tells you that it's more than a coincidence. Speaking of which, it's important to distinguish between a correlation and a coincidence. A coincidence is when two events occur at the same time for unrelated reasons. So, if my toast pops up at the exact moment my mother calls, those two things don't have anything to do with each other, unless my mom has become a toaster psychic. This would just be a weird coincidence. A correlation means that the events are closely related to one another. Coincidences don't give you any useful information to work with. They just happen by chance. What do you say? Want to give it a try? See if you can identify a correlation.
Yeah, so the idea here, correlation is two items, events that have a mutual relationship. The thing to remember here is that correlation does not imply causation. Just like he's saying with, the increase in sales in ice cream doesn't cause a drop in sales in coats, right? Those are not causations. The fact that they're all related is because of, like he says, summertime. So you have to make sure that you understand what the actual cause is. And in different types of debates, you'll hear some people harp on, correlation does not imply causation. So you have to make sure you know exactly what the root is. All right.
Did this article successfully identify a correlation? Why or why not?
And I'm also going to, this is where I want to discuss some economics here after we look at this and before we answer any of the questions. So did the price of gold cause the housing crisis? All right. Always, like every other time. This is a fictional, by the way, a lot of times if it's whatever the source is, they'll give us the actual, like a link to it or whatever. Of course, in this case, this is just for academic purposes to give us some experience with the idea of correlation. But right, so we always still take notice of the title, and it says, we here at the Alltech Now like to look for telltale economic statistics that most economists overlook. Take the 2008 housing crisis, for example. Were you aware the price of gold ramped up at about the same time that the housing price index went down? Suspicious, wouldn't you say? And here they have a little table, right? So HPI, we'll talk about that a little bit, the housing price index. So the housing price index is sort of like, it measures the change in cost of residential housing. So it's sort of like average prices of homes. So we see 2006 average price of home was $250,000, or the housing price index. So 240,000 in 2007, 2008 continues to drop, 225, 210 in 2009, 205 in 2010. Gold, I don't know what measure like amount, right? But we see an increase there in the price of gold over that same. So as the HPI is coming down, the price of gold is going up. Correlation, maybe. So the data speaks for itself, right? They're saying there's clearly a non-coincidental relationship between the price of gold and the housing price index. As the price of gold begins to climb in 2007, the housing price index starts to drop. How could this pattern go overlooked by mainstream economists? Alltech Now believes that the housing price index is vulnerable to fluctuations in the gold market. We as a nation must make an effort to regulate the price of gold, or else we may risk the housing market crashing yet again. So this is where I want to take a minute and discuss the housing crisis, because again, giving you context, because it certainly could be used for examples in your social studies, questions on the exam, and also, some of the details within there. So briefly, I want to start with the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve, you'll hear it in the news referred to a lot as the Fed. And it was created in 1913, I believe. And it was created to alleviate banking panics and economic crises. Okay, there was like a banking panic around that time, and it centralized our monetary system. So it has a lot of responsibilities. For starters, yeah, it regulates banking. It also handles our money supply. So actually, like the cash that's circulating right now. And it's also the banker's bank. So they give out federal loans to banks. And through that in particular, it also greatly influences interest rates. So you'll hear in the news, like the Fed's, changing the interest rate or something like that. They don't change the interest rate like if you go to a bank, right? That's somewhat mostly determined by the individual banking and loaning institutions. But because they loan money to the banks, right? If they change the interest rate, that's going to influence the interest rates for us as consumers, and that's another role that the Fed tries to help with are things like inflation. And of course, I know, you look around today and it's like, well, what the hell's going on? Obviously, there's stuff that's going to be out of their control, or, there's other issues. But through like influencing interest rates and stuff like that, they can help, sort of like cool down the economy if it's getting too hot and we're looking like there could be problems, or try to help stimulate it. Anyway, so interest rates, right? there's pretty much typically, no matter where you go for a loan, what they call a prime rate. And from institution to institution, they're going to be pretty close. The prime rate is what you will receive if you have great credit, right? If you got that credit score in the 800s, you go to whatever scorereport.com or whatever app, and you check your credit. If you're up there, right, and you've got those good numbers, you'll qualify for a prime loan. And that basically means that you get, whatever the best interest rates are at that time, because you're a good bet to pay it back. The bank is betting on you that you're going to be able to pay everything back. Subprime loans, right, are if you don't have good credit, and the interest rates can go up, or they're not going to be as good as a prime rate. There's also part of subprime loans are variable rate loans, and that is a loan that the interest rate can change. And that's also based sort of like on the economy. So if the interest rate, the prime rate's changing, then your interest rate can change in the variable rate loan. Try to avoid variable rate loans as much as you can, right? A prime loan is a fixed rate loan, right? If it's 5.6 or whatever it is, that's what you pay every month. Your interest rate will never change. Subprime loans, a variable rate loan, it could change. So 2000s, maybe going back into the late 1990s, you had a lot of people, not great credit, that were getting subprime mortgages. And some of these were, some of those variable rate, or a lot of them were actually some of those variable rate mortgages. So we get into probably, late 2006, 2007, economy is slowing down. And people are not making their mortgage payments. And then they're defaulting on their loans and they're losing their homes. Some of that was because those rates were changing. Some of it was just because they're getting in over their head on their mortgages and things that, people were also losing their jobs at the time. But so there was a huge upset in the banking world because people were not paying their mortgages. So this was part of the Great Recession of that time. It was one of the main causes, right, was the housing bubble. Probably heard about the housing bubble bursting around that time, late 2007. So people weren't paying their loans. The housing market basically crashed. So banks had to tighten up, who they were loaning to for mortgages because, they were in jeopardy. They couldn't just keep giving out these subprime loans. There's lots of investigations by the government, things like that at the time. So the housing market, the bottom came out of the housing market. So the cost of homes at the time, if you actually were in a situation where you had a good job and you could get a loan, the cost came down. That's, supply and demand theory, right? So if I have something that's in high demand and I have a limited supply, I'm going to charge more for it. Big problem with inflation right now, right? If you're trying to buy an automobile, if you're going to fill up your tank, if you're looking at a house, all those things right now, and of course that's bleeding over into other areas, food or electronics and things like that, because demand is so high. So lower shortage or less supply, so prices are high. The reverse of that, right, is if you have low demand, you have a surplus, then you need to get rid of your inventory, or you're reducing prices so you can actually sell whatever it may be, whether it's houses or automobiles or what have you. So in this case, it's houses. So we see that drop because people are buying less homes because of that housing bubble bust. The lack of availability of mortgages at the time, and things like that. And it was a huge, huge deal. It almost made a lot of banks fail. Insurance companies were in trouble. Auto industries were in trouble and all that. And the people that should have seen it coming didn't. Because the housing market had always been very well, just real estate and the housing market and investing in the housing market was always a sure bet. It was stable. It was a long-term investment that you could make money on in the long term. There was never ever any problems with the housing market. The people who did see it coming made a lot of money by predicting the failure in the housing market. There's these people that investors do what they call shorting stocks. And it's complicated, and I barely have a grasp on it. There's numbers involved, but the idea behind shorting a stock is you are betting against the success of it. You're betting on a stock to fail, and through this whole rigmarole, you wind up making money shorting it. There's a great movie called The Big Short that explains it a lot better than I can. That was about that housing crisis. It's got a lot of good actors in it too. It was based on a book. But a handful of these people saw it coming because they saw all these subprime mortgages as part of these mutual funds and things. So they just were waiting it out and knowing it was going to collapse. And the rest of the investment world just thought these guys were lunatics. But when it collapsed, they all got stupid rich. And sadly, a lot of people lost their homes, lost their jobs and everything. But so, yeah, getting back to housing price index, right? So that was a big component of why the housing price index started to drop, because nobody was buying houses because the housing industry had just collapsed, or the housing market had collapsed. Anyway, so here they're talking about a correlation between gold and the housing market, right? Two things that people will invest in. Now, can we make a correlation out of this? Why or why not would there possibly be a correlation? Let's see. I'm going to ask Mariama. Do we have a correlation here?
Yeah, it's B.
B, yeah, identified a correlation between the price of gold. So there's certainly a correlation.
Great job. The author does show that the price of gold goes up during the same time that the housing price index goes down. It's really the correlating behavior that shows the relationship. As the price of gold goes up, the HPI consistently goes down.
Yeah, so correlation. But what else might that mean? Let's take his time.
Once you've identified a correlation, your next step is to determine whether it's a relationship of cause and effect. A cause and effect relationship means that something caused something else to happen. Like, say my city closed down 7th Street. Some drivers would need to find an alternate route. So, if I were to suddenly see more traffic on 6th and 8th Street, I would suspect that there's something causing the traffic. If I knew 7th Street was closed, I might conclude it's cause and effect. Drivers who would normally take 7th Street might take 6th and 8th Street, creating more traffic on those streets. Cause, effect. One event is causing the other to occur. That's causation. Cause and effect involves a flow of logic. You can sort of see how one event pushes into the next, kind of like falling dominoes. If it rains, the roads become slippery. If the roads are slippery, cars need more distance to come to a stop. If cars need more distance to stop, drivers need to drive slower. Do you see the logic? How each event causes the next? Seeing the logic is important because until you see the logic of how one event causes another, you can't be sure it's causation. What's more, one cause can have multiple effects. Frank gets a job. Frank pays back a loan. Frank gets a new car. Frank moves out of his parents' house. One cause, three effects. Sometimes effects can become new causes, too. Frank gets a new car, but now Frank has to pay for gas. Frank needs a parking spot. Frank needs insurance. This kind of branching cause and effect can describe almost any series of events, from a court trial to world history. Not only can causes have multiple effects, but one effect can have multiple causes. Back in 2003, San Diego had a massive wildfire, the Cedar Fire, that burned almost 300,000 acres of land. The fire was accidentally started by a lost hunter, but there were other causes to consider as well. The surrounding vegetation was dry from a prolonged heat wave. Outdated policies slowed the emergency response. The Santa Ana winds pushed the fire along. Each factor contributed to one of the worst fires in California history. Multiple causes, one effect. So, what do you say? Do you think you can identify a causation?
All right. Yeah. So that's what we were talking about, right? So here, multiple causes, right? If you tried to go start a forest, well, I should say you should go try to start a forest fire, but around here in Franklin County or the surrounding area, you're not going to see very many forest fires right now because we've had plenty of rain. And of course, on this side of the U.S., you don't see very many forest fires anyway, just because we tend to get a lot more rain. But yeah, that's a perfect storm there, as they say, right? If anytime in a lot of the West, Southern California, it's always dry. I spent some time out there, and it's just like it's scary just how walking like out in the woods, I guess you could say, just the way everything crunches and sounds, and you could just see one spark just setting it off. So, and one thing that exacerbates that, if you do have a fire, is wind, right? It's going to spread a lot faster. It's going to be a lot hotter, and that made things worse. So everything wound up creating this effect of this great fire in 2003. So that is our sort of multiple cause and effect idea there.
This article successfully identify a cause and effect relationship. Why or why not?
Right. So back to our housing price index and gold. So just looking here, right, we have the idea that the price of gold caused a housing crisis. We have a table that shows the downturn in the HPI and the upturn in gold at the same time. So now it's asking us, we say, well, okay, we have a correlation. Now it's asking us, did this article successfully identify a cause and effect relationship? And then we have our boxes here asking why or why not. I want to ask, let's see, Nautica, how about I go to you this time? Do we have a cause here, cause and effect relationship?
I say yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
So we don't have a cause and effect relationship. We do have a correlation, but
Okay.
it doesn't show how the price of gold negatively impacted the housing price index, right? So these events are happening at the same time. There's probably another cause. And as a matter of fact, you'll see this quite a bit when you have an economic downturn. So, why would the price of gold rise when you have other markets that are failing? So, the overall, the actual cause, right, is sort of that Great Recession, this economic downturn. What tends to happen in those, people who can invest and have the discretionary income to move things around, will pull their money out of things like a housing market that was failing at the time, and they put it into things like precious metals, like gold, because it's a lot more stable. And because of that, a lot more people are moving their money into that that market, we're going to see that price rise. So it's actually because of a lack of confidence in the economy and people that can still invest, moving their money to a different area, and they're making that rise while the other market is failing. So yeah, the overall cause of the effect is still that sort of economic downturn and the recession of that time. You might remember, like, was it last year, I think, might have been around the same time, there was that GameStop stock fiasco. And the price of GameStop stock went sky high, right, over a course of a few days. And that was artificially inflated. So there was these guys who were just sort of like hobbyist investors, they're not like big time, stock market guys or anything, but they got together and they sort of colluded and they all bought GameStop stock because it was a failing stock. And there was guys who were shorting that stock, betting on it to fail. So sort of as a punishment for those guys, these people started buying up all this GameStop stock. So when you start buying up a stock, right, it starts rising, right? It starts making more money. So over the course of like a week or something, it went from like, I don't know, like a $10 share to like 200 or something ridiculous, to the point where there was actually some intervention because it was, artificially inflating the price. So the same kind of things kind of happening there. It's not necessarily artificially inflated, but it is being pushed because the market, is volatile and people are looking for things that are a sure bet. And, gold, precious metals, and things like that are often a sure bet. And they'll move their money towards stuff like that out of something that's more speculative, like, like the housing market at the time or technology or something like that. Yeah, so no.
Great job. The article fails to explain the logic of how the rising price of gold is negatively impacting the housing price index. Without an explanation of how one event is causing the other to occur, this is just a correlation.
Right, and as I mentioned, that's the big caution when you see correlations. Correlation does not imply causation. If something is happening like that, right, we're talking about a market, those things are related. There's a mutual relationship between the two, and if one's going up and one's going down, okay, there's a relationship there, but we can't say that one's causing the other. We need some more information there. We need more data. All right, and that should lead us into our questions. Let's see here. Yep.
Now it's time to show that you've learned this concept.
Okay, so let me stop sharing here my screen. Wow, things are really lagging today. Like even my toolbar at the bottom is taking forever to come up. So I hope that like I'm coming through clear, like you didn't have any, I can see on my camera that I'm kind of, freezing every once in a while. But hopefully like my audio and everything's okay and you're able to hear the lesson. Yeah, so let's go ahead and we'll take a few minutes. I am going to work through those questions as well, and then we might do a quick review after we finish them. So let's go ahead. We'll start with 10 minutes and I'll see how I'm doing and I'll check in with you guys. I'll go ahead and pause here. Whatever problems Rachel may have had this morning, it may have actually been the network or Zoom and not necessarily on her end. All right, and going to the next one. So which of the following is cause and effect relationship between the text? So basically your rag paper, oil-based ink, and block printing led to the invention of the printing press. Just like in today, the invention of the integrated circuit, right, led to our computers and our cell phones and things like that. We don't have to have vacuum tubes like old school televisions, to manage our circuitry anymore, right? Just like what's something else? What's a good technology that's been applied? Can't think of anything right now. But yeah, so those things, right? Those minor inventions led to the larger invention of the printing press. and adhere. So based on the passage, which of the following events are not correlated? So the invention of the printing press and the rise of literacy, because that's a cause and effect, not correlation, right? So here's a good example of knowing the difference between cause and effect and correlation. The printing press came first, and then over time you had the rise of literacy in Europe. There we go. And then on to our Salem witch trials, right? This shows you what fear can do to
You're doing very
people.
well.
This
You got all of the first big
crazy,
questions.
time in well, early American history, colonial American history, where all these women were accused of witchcraft, and so that's become sort of a moniker, right? A witch hunt, right? Which is this idea when people are really afraid of something and they start sort of condemning it or going after it, it's often considered a witch hunt. So which of the following is cause and effect relationship described in the text? So here it's a group of girls accusing several women of being witches, right? So a group of girls accused several women of being witches, right? Cause and effect, that was the cause. And then the effect was women were arrested for witchcraft. Right? Like it says, a cause and effect relationship, something happens, causes something else. And which are correlated. So mutual relationship. In this case, town leaders set up court and Bridget Bishop was convicted and executed, right? Those things happened, right? That's not a cause and effect, that's a correlation. Came from the special court set up by the town leaders. This makes the two ideas related, not and so correlated. The other answers represent events that are less related in time and topic. And which of the following is not an effect of the townfolk becoming less upset about witches? So the 19 people were executed, most of whom were later found to be innocent, right? That didn't make the townfolk less upset about witches. It was the realization that they shouldn't be doing this. The townfolk were changing their mind, so it did not cause the executions, right? The other answers are all represent the effects of the town changing its mind about the trials. All right, number 7. So which of the following events are not correlated to the hanging of Bridget Bishop? A special court, or sorry, people become upset at the idea of witches. So not correlated, people becoming upset at the idea of witches in town. Right. Although the people's fears led to the creation of the court, it's the court itself that is most closely correlated to Bishop's trial and punishment. Last one. Okay. Townsfolk become upset at the idea of witches in town, and arrests warrants were issued, right? So there's correlation here, not causation. Right? So only correlation that isn't also a causation. Although the townsfolk's fear and paranoia had many consequences, the arrest warrants were issued because the group of girls accused several women of a crime. All right. So before we take a break here, you got to be careful with cause and effect and correlation. So there's good examples there. Make sure you're asking the questions, okay, what caused this? Time and things running parallel on time is really important here. So the perfect example is like the printing press. Okay, that's not correlated with the rise of literacy because the printing press happened before. So understanding, and we're going to do a little more with this like order of events type of ideas. So we'll get a better understanding, making sure that you understand when the events happen. That's going to play a big part in whether it's correlation or it's cause and effect. Okay. Any questions on cause and effect, correlation, causation, anything there before we take a break? Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and take a break then. We'll go ahead. We'll say 1:45. Take about, well, yeah, that's a nice round even number, about 13 minutes there. And we'll come back and do some language arts, some grammar and mechanics. All right. All right. I'll see you in language arts.
Thank you.
All right.